Falconer back into the video here today to give you my official review to this new Benny the Butcher album, Everybody Can't Go. The long-awaited Def Jam debut has arrived, and I gotta say this is a pretty interesting project. So going into it, of course, I was watching all the Benny interviews and all the lead up. This was probably, in my opinion, the greatest rollout that I've ever witnessed. On being on YouTube, from the freestyles to the leading singles to the interviews and all that good stuff. It really, like, the rollout was, in my opinion, something that was genuinely epic, and a moment that I really hope that people pay attention to, look back on, all that good stuff. And now we have the album, and with that being said, of course, I had my own high expectations for the album. I was proclaiming certain things, and generally the way that this album was talked about was it was supposed to be Benny's introduction into the mainstream. With this new sort of label push that he was going to get, he was focusing more on melodies and the music, and that was the sort of information that we were giving prior. And honestly, I was a bit mixed on this information. I, on one hand, was excited because this is something I've wanted Benny to do for a while, and it was something that I think was missing from Tana Talk 4, was just that level of bumpability. And so I was really excited to see him sort of delve back into it. I've also seen him do this more mainstream style to relative success, with Burden of Proof, obviously signed, by the way. And I was definitely, I could definitely see this working out. That being said, I was a little bit concerned because the last time somebody tried to make mainstream, a real mainstream push on an album level, it didn't turn out all that good, in my opinion, with And Then You Pray For Me. And so I was wondering, are we going to get, an expansion of the Griselda sound that's more accessible, like we got on Burden of Proof? Or were we going to get the forcing of the Griselda sound onto trap beats, without any sort of experimentation or effort to ensure quality of sound? Or were we just going to get a bunch of safe Benny tracks where he doesn't really tread any new ground and just sticks to what he's good at? And I'm here to report we got kind of all of it, I guess. Like, this album is a bit of a doozy for me because, like, not bad, but just a bit, it's kind of all over the place for me because I feel like we kind of get all of those things. But let's get straight into it. For the writing, this is something where I have to give this an amazing. A lot of people are sort of reacting to the less bar-heavy aspect of this album with certain songs like maybe Big Dog or what's it called, Buffalo Kitchen Club, not having as many over quotables as, say, Tana Talk 4 or Burden of Proof. However, I think he supplements that in two very important ways. I think that he has a lot of really good storytelling. If you listen to Buffalo Kitchen Club, if you listen to Trust More Valuable Than Love, one of the best songs I have ever heard in my life from a Griselda member, following three really interesting stories. The last one getting a bit eerie, with him talking about that time he got shot in Houston that sparked up the Freddie Gibbs beef. And then you have How to Rap, which not only is a beautiful narrative story about his journey in the rap game, but also covers something else that I felt was really great and present throughout this album. And it's something that I think that Benny sort of does best, and it's where I think he really strives, is as this sort of mentor figure. I think the best kind of conscious rap is the conscious rap where you're not dogging on drugs and guns and blah, 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 blah. You're not dogging on the people who live that lifestyle, but instead you're actually giving them an alternative. You're giving them steps and a process to move away from that lifestyle. I think that's the best kind of consciousness because it's the consciousness that actually helps people. And it's the consciousness that's actually able to be applied and be uplifting, right? And from, How to Rap, to Jermaine's Graduation, which was also a very, very great song. You see Benny sort of crossed these sort of boundaries from a lyrical standpoint, where he's giving out game, he's helping people out. Pillows and the one with Jadakiss, very good track. If this was the old me, this is what I would tell him, right? And so you sort of have this mix of this conscious lesson mentor aspect that Benny gives, as well as these storytelling things that make up for the lack of bars, which I want to be clear is a lack, but not a void of, because you still have songs like One Foot In, One Foot Out, Jermaine's Graduation, where you're still getting these witty, dope punchlines, right? So yeah, I thought the writing was amazing for that reason. And yeah, features, and this was a bit of a doozy. There was no. It felt like the features were all over the place in terms of quality. I'm gonna be honest with you. There were some really high highs with Lil Wayne and Stove God Cooks and Jadakiss, in my opinion, who, despite having a very raspy voice, I think hops on songs where that raspy voice works in context. Then you had kind of your middling features, which were a decent step down from the peak, but still solid, with stuff like Armani Caesar on Buffalo Kitchen Club, which I'll get into that song later, as well as Snoop Dogg on Back Again, which I mentioned was a bit of a wordy chorus. But then you got like these features are just bad, or just either bad or very underwhelming. Babyface Ray on that same song, he wasn't necessarily super bad, but in comparison to what Benny and Jadakiss were giving, he just felt really out of place. I don't know who Peasy is, and I don't think I want to know who he is after this album. I can't lie to y'all. Westside Gunn sounded terrible on Griselda Express. The beat was not. He wasn't really matching the beat all that well. The chorus was just not that great. The rest of the guys were fine, and I even like the new guy on Griselda Express, Rick. I can't remember his last name, but that song is really just capped at the knees by this terrible chorus, in my opinion. And so the features were kind of all over the place. Some amazing, some just good, some bad, in my opinion. And so for that reason, I'm going to say that the features were good. And I definitely am taking the highlights. Now, from a flow perspective, and this is where I was most interested in what Benny was going to do. Benny, up to this point, has impressed me with some flows, but I think his delivery, still being a bit monotone up to this point, was a bit of a hindrance for him. That being said, I do feel like there was an improvement made. I don't know if I can quite give it the amazing rating because I don't think his flows were quite as shocking as a JID or a Fabio Foreign, nor did his vocal style change up so much like a Sleepy Hollow. But I do feel like I could tell that he was messing with different flows. I could tell he was messing with different melodies. And I could tell there was an attempt at sort of different vocal inflections on his part, from the more subdued Big Dog to the boisterous Braun to the sort of offbeat Detroit style rapping he had on Big Timers. While I wasn't crazy about all of it, cough cough, Big Timers, I do see the expansive amount of flows that he was bringing, and I really appreciated that. Buffalo Kitchen Highlights was also a different flow that I really thought was great, and yeah, it was cool to see him experiment in that way, and it definitely made for a diverse listen. That was really, really interesting. And so overall, I'm going to still give it a great, because I don't really feel like there were any flows on here that were like extremely captivating, maybe besides Trust More Valuable Than Love, where his menacing delivery really fits the tone of the song. And maybe Braun as well was definitely like a super highlight flow wise, but other than that, none of the flows were like insanely spectacular in my opinion, so I would go with a grade on that. Musical execution, and this is, I think, where I am the most sort of torn, mixed, whatever. And this is, I feel like the leading singles for this were so strong. And, going back to my earlier point about whether or not this suffers from the Pay for Paris syndrome, or this, rises in the same way that A Burden of Proof does, It's a bit of a mix, right? So there are some songs on here where I wonder why he was really flexing that this was a different album. Songs like Jermaine's Graduation, Trust More Valuable Than Love don't really feel different from run of the mill Benny tracks. Uh, then you have sort of these middle of the road, I don't know, like they are definitely departures for Benny, but and they are awesome. They're good songs. I like them, but they don't quite work in their entirety. This is definitely reserved for Back Again and Buffalo Kitchen Lights, which both from a chorus perspective feel a little bit awkward. And on Buffalo Kitchen, I think his discussion about like sex with such a harsh vocal tone, musically, it doesn't really mesh all that well. And Back Again, y'all heard I said the chorus feels a bit wordy. Um, but then you have the leading singles, and you have like this like incredible chorus on One Foot In, One Foot Out, and Braun. Big Dog has really grown on me since I first heard it. And while it's not like the greatest song that Benny's ever created, I do appreciate that song for the diversity it adds to the track list, and I do understand and really like where it's coming from. I do also want to mention the title track, Everybody Can't Go, which, while the vocals were not anything insane or mind blowing, I thought was a really great track. And again, goes down as one of those teachable moments that Benny has. And sonically, this falls into the category of Big Dog and Braun, where it's a departure from the normal Benny sound, but I think it's still very, very good. But then you still have Big Timers, which is this kind of like mediocre trap beat and uh, you know these flows that don't really work that well. And I know I'm harping on like one song after another, but when the albums are shorter, each song sticks out harder, and it's also difficult because that song was the last song on the album, so it's kind of the thing that sticks with you at the end of the listen, right? So I think that I can see the attempt for a musical improvement, um, but I still don't feel like it's musically as solid as a Burden of Proof or a When I Met the Plugs Part Two. And so for that reason, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a great still. Uh, and in the production, this might surprise you given what I just said about musical execution, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it an amazing. I feel like, especially when you have beats like when you have songs like Pillow Talk and Slander, One Foot In, One Foot Out, Big Dog especially, man. The Alchemist, I'm not even crazy about The Alchemist, but from what he did on Hall and Nash to what he's doing on Big Dog, I can't even hate, bro. That boy cooking, in my opinion, personally. And so like uh Big Timers aside, all the beats I felt like were really, really good. I love the bass line on Kitchen, on Buffalo Kitchen Club, and same thing with Back Again. Jermaine's Graduation was a gorgeous opener. Again, a little bit safe for Benny the Butcher, but still, fine. I like how he stuck to, the producers that he was familiar with Alchemist and Hit Boy. I feel like him and Hit Boy genuinely do have some of the best chemistry of any like New York rap, producer duo, whatever. It was super, super impressive what they had to offer. Super, super great. Yeah, so I was definitely a big fan of the production overall, and there were no bad beats on here besides Big Timers, and most of the beats were amazing. So I'm gonna go ahead and give the production amazing. One thing I also want to say about the features that was a bit disappointing was like, you get Wayne on here and you kind of assume that this is going to have like a more star-studded feature list, and with his debut on Def Jam, you think that, he has more resources to sort of pull larger than life features. And I'm not saying I want to see a Benny the Butcher and Lil Baby collab, but I think there were certain artists who, uh, you know, for example, like that Big Timer song, I think that maybe a Babytron or hell, Babyface Ray, who was already on here, maybe would have fit better on something like that. I was kind of surprised that besides Lil Wayne and Snoop Dogg, which are relatively older, legacy acts, he didn't really have any like star-studded big names. And in terms of being, and I'm not saying he should, and I think it's great that he puts on lower key artists, but I will say, for the sake of it being this introduction to the mainstream, to me, it didn't bode as well because I didn't hear as many recognizable voices. So that's something I think maybe could have helped the feature list a little bit more. But like I said, I don't want to hate on the feature list too hard because I know how important it is for Benny to be putting on people who are good and people who are quality, and stuff like that. So yeah, uh, that was musical. I'm sorry, that was production. And overall, I thought this album was great, teetering on amazing, honestly. There are a lot of great elements to this record, and I'm sorry, there are a lot of amazing aspects of this record, and there are some very high highs. Again, How to Rap, Trust More Valuable Than Love, and all that good stuff. But I do think that there are some flaws with the album that hold it back from truly being like the best thing it could possibly be, or Benny's best project yet. And so for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give it a grade. Very close to the amazing. I could definitely see this being in the top 10, with how good it is and depending on how the year goes. But yeah, let me know what y'all thought of this album in the comment section below. Really enjoyed it. With that being said, peace, y'all.